Hey everyone, welcome to Judging for the Win. I'm Dave, and this is my daily ruling. Today's question was suggested by a viewer. Thanks to Trisaru for this one. Amy attacks with Ilharg, the Rage Boar, and puts in a Purphoros, God of the Forge. Does Purphoros deal combat damage? Is it returned to Amy's hand at end of turn? Okay, so the first obvious thing to note here about this question is that it gets a lot less interesting if Amy has Devotion. Given that Amy's Devotion is sufficient to keep Purphoros being a creature once it's on the battlefield, I hope it isn't too controversial to say that Purphoros will deal damage and be returned to Amy's hand just like any other creature would be. If you've been a fan of the channel for a while now, you might remember that for technical reasons there are some non-obvious interactions that can result from this Devotion not a creature ability when the card in question is the final Devotion point that you need. Fortunately, these complications only arise when considering how enters the battlefield replacement effects work when applied to such cards. If you'd like a fuller explanation, I made a whole video on such effects, and I talked about this specific interaction about 2/3 of the way through. Regardless, nothing like that is going on here, so for the question posed in the original problem statement, everything works entirely as expected if you have 5 or more Devotion, and that includes the one that you get from Purphoros itself. Now, the next interesting question that comes up is whether Purphoros would get returned to your hand if the Devotion was less than 5 at the end of the turn, since it won't be a creature anymore, and Ilharg's ability says to return that creature. Unfortunately for Amy, the Purphoros will still be returned whether it's a creature or not. The phrase, "that creature," is used to identify Purphoros, and the game will still see that reference even if Purphoros is not a creature at that time. With that, we can turn our attention to the first part of the question from the original problem statement. Purphoros is a creature card, so the instruction to put it on the battlefield tapped happens normally. I find the text of the CR a little bit ambiguous as to whether Purphoros is put onto the battlefield attacking and then gets removed from combat, or whether it just gets put onto the battlefield tapped and is never considered to have been attacking. Here's a couple of citations for rules that might be used to argue for one position or the other. In any case, I'd be inclined to put a little bit more effort into coming up with a firm answer if someone could come up with a reasonable situation where this distinction actually mattered for anything. To close out, I'll mention a couple of other points about Ilharg's ability that you might be curious about. Since this ability doesn't say what the creature that you're putting in is attacking, that means that you are not forced to attack anything in particular. It could be the same as what Ilharg is attacking or something different. Players, planeswalkers, and battles are all valid choices. If there's any costs or restrictions like Silent Arbiter or Propaganda, putting something into play bypasses those if you put it into play attacking. I talked about this in my video about Kalia of the Vast plus Propaganda, so you can check that out if you'd like a full explanation. That's all I have for you today. How did you do? Join me again next time for another daily ruling. Until then, I hope you have a great day.